The hum of 300 conversations, lubricated by vintage champagne and the heady scent of ambition, abruptly ceased. It was not a sudden power outage, nor the dramatic crash of glass, but the precise surgical cessation of laughter that drew the first collective breath of unease across the panoramic penthouse 40 stories above Manhattan. Elias Thorne, the epicenter of this gilded universe, the prodigy whose 20th birthday and monumental success they were celebrating, had been standing precisely where the light caught the edge of the imported marble bar. He was mid-sentence, apparently mid-anecdote about the sheer impossibility of funding his latest visionary urban renewal project, his hand gesturing emphatically toward the breathtaking sweep of the city lights below. Then he was gone. He didn't stumble, didn't excuse himself, and no door swung shut behind him. He simply ceased to occupy that space. The crystal glass that should have been in his grasp now lay forgotten on the polished surface, its perfectly chilled contents beginning to weep into the condensation. The real break, the profound, resonant fracture, was the vacuum left by his absence. Elias Thorne, the wunderkind of sustainable architecture, the man who had redefined the phrase too big to fail by achieving staggering success before hitting 30, had evaporated from a sealed room, surrounded by 300 witnesses, power brokers, and journalists, not one of whom could coherently recall seeing him take a single step away. This wasn't just a departure, it was a vanishing act performed without the aid of smoke, mirrors, or malice. It was the perfect, chilling erasure of a public life. The setting itself amplified the sheer impossibility of the event. The Gala for the Future of Cities was held in the Thorne Tower's exclusive Sky Suite, a fortress of modern design known for its uncompromising security protocols. Every entrance and exit, including the service passages and the single freight elevator, was monitored by discreet, yet omnipresent, security cameras and personnel. The balcony, offering a terrifyingly beautiful view, was sealed off by nearly impenetrable, chest-high panes of specially treated glass. The whole floor was essentially a secure bubble. Yet within minutes, the initial ripple of confusion transformed into a tidal wave of panic, a desperate silent search beginning among the high-profile guests who now felt intensely vulnerable. They weren't searching for a misplaced coat or a lost phone. They were searching for the physical instantiation of success itself. Where had Elias gone? The conflict deepened immediately upon the arrival of the authorities, spearheaded by Detective Sergeant Lena Cale, whose pragmatic realism was instantly tested by the sheer absurdity of the facts. Cale's team meticulously scoured every inch of the suite. No sign of struggle. No forced entry or exit. The security footage, when reviewed, offered the most perplexing contradiction. At 11:47 p.m., Elias was clearly visible, smiling, engaging. The camera angle was steady, encompassing the immediate vicinity. Then, at 11:47 and 14 seconds, the space he occupied was empty. There was no flicker, no jump cut, no technical error. It was as if the frame rate had momentarily paused the universe, and in that millisecond, Elias had been edited out. The only physical clue left behind was found tucked near the railing of the closed-off observation deck, a heavy platinum Patek Philippe watch. It was a gift from his initial investors, a symbol of the immense weight of expectation he carried. Elias Thorne never, ever removed that watch. It was a famous quirk, a sort of constant reminder of the ticking clock of his ambition. Its presence, abandoned precisely where he had last stood, felt less like a forgotten item and more like a deliberate shedding of armor. Cale found the sight chilling, sensing that this vanishing wasn't passive, but the culmination of a deeply premeditated act, a strategic abandonment of self. This revelation opened the first true loop in the mystery. Why would a man who possessed everything suddenly choose nothing? Interviews with his inner circle revealed a pattern of behavior that had been too subtle to notice amidst the roar of his public accolades. His fiancée, tearful and bewildered, mentioned his increasing restlessness, his long unexplained drives late at night, and a growing preoccupation with older, philosophical texts rather than the spreadsheets that demanded his attention. His COO admitted that Elias had recently begun delegating key projects that he would normally obsess over, sometimes muttering darkly about the golden cage of success, and the hollow victory of building magnificent structures in a world that felt fundamentally meaningless to him. He was a millionaire prodigy who, despite his external life shining brighter than anyone else's, harbored a profound internal darkness, a gnawing suspicion that he was living a lie designed by expectation, not by purpose. This internal conflict became the true focus of the investigation, shifting the search from the physical to the philosophical. Elias wasn't fleeing a debt or a hidden crime. He seemed to be fleeing his entire persona. This was the progressive escalation that kept the world, and Detective Cale, gripped. The development moved away from typical police procedure. Instead of dusting for fingerprints, Cale's team was analyzing his last spoken words, searching for cryptic signs in his marginalized notes. They found references in his personal laptop to obscure historical figures who had deliberately walked away from power, men who had chosen anonymity over empire. The pattern interrupt occurred when Cale realized the security feed hadn't failed. It had simply captured a movement too swift and too integrated into the environment to register as suspicious. A brief 4-second surge in the building's electrical grid, a minuscule planned distraction timed to coincide with a large loud cocktail shaker dropping in the service area, provided the window. The physical exit was still a puzzle. But the why was beginning to crystallize. Elias Thorne had successfully built cities for others, but he had failed to build a life for himself. The architecture was flawless, the materials premium, but the inhabitant felt fundamentally alien inside the walls of his own making. The vast, cavernous success had swallowed his soul, leaving him a charismatic automaton. This was the motivational crux of the mystery. The disappearance wasn't a tragedy, but a desperate search for authenticity. The world had sought a body or a betrayal, expecting the narrative of the brilliant young man to end in spectacular downfall. What they were witnessing, however, was a philosophical statement written in absence. This realization served as the re-engagement, the second deeper hook that captured global attention. Perhaps the vanishing was not an escape from something, but an escape to something. Was this a breakdown, or a monumental breakthrough in self-discovery? The investigation finally yielded a concrete answer about the means, though it hardly satisfied the press. Near the service bar, obscured entirely by a velvet curtain and only accessible via a staff keycard Elias had meticulously replicated months earlier, was a small, unassuming maintenance door. It led to a steep, rarely used utility staircase, designated only for emergency plumbing access. This was the route. Simple, pedestrian, and entirely non-dramatic. Elias Thorne hadn't used a jetpack or a hidden tunnel. He had exploited human assumption and poor building maintenance. The genius lay not in the complexity of the exit, but in the brazen simplicity of exploiting the blind spots of a highly complex security system he himself had designed. He slipped away during a 4-second distraction, blending in with the catering staff entering the staircase, using a borrowed uniform. The true climax, however, lay not in the realization of the maintenance door, but in the final entry found scribbled on the last page of his private journal, concealed beneath a loose floorboard in his deserted office. It wasn't a suicide note, nor a declaration of hatred for his life, but a declaration of intent. It was concise, profound, and devastatingly honest. The world celebrates the illusion, the grand design. But the only way to truly build the future, a sustainable, honest future, is to stop living the life others designed for you. I must become the apprentice again, the builder, not the owner. I must start from the ground, with dirt under my nails and truth in my purpose. Everything else is just polished steel and borrowed light. Elias had shed the weight of expectation, the platinum watch, the perfect suit, and the name that carried the burden of millions of dollars. He hadn't vanished into thin air, he had vanished into reality, choosing the hard, fulfilling work of authenticity over the soft, suffocating luxury of prepackaged success. The mystery wasn't about where he went, but about what he had refused to become. The ultimate payoff was the subtle realization that Elias Thorne wasn't lost. He was simply found by himself, living anonymously somewhere far from the glittering penthouse, perhaps actually building the small, community-focused, sustainable housing projects he had only theorized about in boardrooms. He traded the grand architecture of ambition for the humble, vital structure of meaning. He didn't need the validation of the 300 guests or the millions of dollars tied up in his name. He only needed the quiet conviction of his own hands and the silence necessary to hear his own true voice. His vanishing was not a crime, but a profound, necessary act of self-reclamation. It was the most successful, courageous, and consequential construction project of his life, the architecture of a new soul. And so we are left with the silence of the empty space where Elias Thorne once stood, a space that now serves as an eternal, challenging question mark. We must ask ourselves, what part of our own life are we waiting to vanish from? What heavy, platinum watch are we clinging to, simply because others expect us to wear it? The mystery of the young man who vanished in the middle of a party is not about finding him, but about understanding that he had the courage to truly find himself. Now the quiet challenge remains, whispering in the echo of his absence. What are you willing to abandon to finally be free?